From the outside, their marriage looked like something pulled from the glossy pages of a luxury magazine. Their mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city, its glass walls glowing softly at night like a palace above the clouds. Expensive cars lined the circular driveway, and perfectly trimmed hedges framed the marble entrance. Their names appeared regularly in business journals and charity event guest lists. To the public, they were the definition of success: wealth, beauty, influence, and a baby on the way. He was a self-made millionaire, sharp-suited and sharp-tongued, admired for his discipline and feared for his temper. In boardrooms, his word carried weight. Employees straightened when he walked in. He thrived on control, on order, on being respected. Reputation meant everything to him. Every photo posted online was carefully curated. Every interview rehearsed. Every public appearance polished to perfection. He didn't just build a business, he built an image. She, on the other hand, had once been the warmth beside his fire. Kind-hearted and thoughtful, she used to soften his edges with laughter and empathy. When they first met, he admired her intelligence and calm spirit. But over time, admiration turned into possession. Now, pregnant with their first child, she moved through the mansion like a delicate guest rather than its mistress. She smiled beside him at charity galas, one hand resting gently on her growing belly, while cameras flashed and guests congratulated them. Online, their pregnancy announcement gathered thousands of likes within minutes. He wrote about legacy and family values. She read the comments alone later that night, sitting on the edge of their enormous bed, feeling strangely hollow. In private, he questioned her spending, reviewed her credit card statements, discouraged visits with friends he didn't approve of, and brushed aside her opinions as emotional. The world saw perfection. She felt distance. And behind the marble walls of their mansion, cracks had already begun to form. The night it happened, the skies seemed to warn them first. Dark clouds rolled in without mercy, swallowing the evening light, and thunder cracked across the horizon like a threat waiting to be fulfilled. Rain lashed violently against the tall glass windows of their mansion, blurring the city lights below. Inside, the air felt just as heavy. It began with something small, so small it should have dissolved into nothing. She mentioned that she had gone to her prenatal appointment alone that afternoon. She had waited for him, called him twice, but he never showed. When she gently asked why he hadn't answered, he didn't look up from his phone. "I was busy," he said flatly. "With what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "You said you'd be there." The doctor wanted to discuss. "Oh, here we go," he cut in, finally lifting his eyes, already irritated. "You're overreacting again." The rain grew louder, drumming against the glass as if echoing her rising heartbeat. "I'm not overreacting," she replied quietly. "This is our baby." He let out a sharp laugh. "You've been impossible lately. Emotional. Dramatic. Blame it on the hormones if you want." Something inside her shifted. For months, she had swallowed her words, excused his absence, convinced herself that stress made him distant. But tonight, standing there with one hand protectively resting on her belly, she felt something stronger than fear. "I deserve respect," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "And so does this child." His expression hardened instantly. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in his own home. Especially not by her. His ego, carefully polished and protected, felt scratched. "Respect," he snapped. "You live in luxury because of me." "I'm your wife," she replied. "Not your employee." Thunder exploded overhead, shaking the windows. The argument spiraled, words growing sharper, more reckless. Accusations replaced reason. He began pacing, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You've changed," he said bitterly. "How do I even know this baby is mine?" The room went silent except for the storm. Her breath caught in her throat. The accusation hit deeper than any insult. She stared at him, stunned, as if he had just struck her. "How could you say that?" she whispered. His jaw tightened, pride overtaking remorse. And then he delivered the final blow. "If you don't like it here, then leave." The words had barely settled in the air when his anger transformed into action. He moved toward her with a cold determination that made her step back instinctively. For a split second, she thought he might calm down, that he would see the fear in her eyes and stop. Instead, he grabbed her coat from the nearby chair and thrust it toward her chest, snatching her purse from the table with the other hand. "You want to leave?" he said harshly. "Then go." She stumbled backward as he seized her arm, his grip tight and unyielding. "Please," she begged, trying to keep her balance. "Don't do this. Think about the baby." But he wasn't listening. Pride and fury drowned out reason. He dragged her across the polished marble floor toward the grand entrance. The massive double doors stood tall and imposing, like the gates of a fortress. With one forceful pull, he opened them. Wind roared into the house instantly. Rain blew inside in violent sheets, soaking the entryway within seconds. Thunder cracked so loudly it felt as if the sky itself was splitting apart. The storm was merciless. 2 security staff members stood near the driveway under the covered arch. They saw everything: the raised voices, the forceful grip, the panic in her eyes. But they remained frozen, bound by hierarchy and fear of losing their jobs. In this house, his word was law. "Please," she cried again, clutching her stomach. "I could fall. Please." He shoved her forward. Her foot met the rain-slick marble step, and it slid instantly. Time slowed in a cruel, suspended moment. Her body tilted backward, and instinct took over. Both hands flew protectively over her belly as she lost balance completely. She fell hard. The impact shot pain through her back and hips, knocking the air from her lungs. For a second, she couldn't breathe. Rain soaked her hair, her clothes, her skin. Cold water pooled beneath her as shock flooded her senses. Fear followed, sharp, suffocating, unbearable. The mansion doors slammed shut with a deafening finality. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating her trembling figure lying helpless on the stone. Tears mixed with rain as she curled slightly, whispering through chattering teeth, "Please, not my baby." She didn't know how long she lay there in the rain. Minutes felt like hours as the cold seeped into her bones and the pain in her lower abdomen began to pulse with terrifying intensity. Through blurred vision, she saw one of the security guards step back into the shadows, glancing nervously toward the closed doors before pulling out his phone. He turned away, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. She couldn't hear the words, but soon distant sirens pierced through the storm. The ambulance lights cut through the darkness in flashing red and white streaks. Paramedics rushed toward her, kneeling in the rain, asking questions she struggled to answer. "I'm pregnant," she managed to whisper. "Please, my baby." They carefully lifted her onto a stretcher, shielding her stomach as they moved. The hospital emergency room was a blur of bright lights and hurried footsteps. Nurses spoke in clipped, efficient tones. Machines beeped. Curtains swished closed around her bed. She felt hands pressing gently but urgently against her abdomen, an oxygen mask placed over her face. Every second felt like a countdown to something irreversible. Fear consumed her. What if the fall had done permanent damage? What if her baby had suffered because she didn't leave sooner? Guilt gnawed at her chest. She replayed the argument in her mind, wondering if she could have said something different, something calmer. Regret mixed with dread as tears slipped silently down her temples. The doctor's face remained tense as he moved the ultrasound device across her stomach. The room grew painfully quiet except for the faint static from the monitor. She searched his expression for clues, holding her breath. Then there it was. A rapid, steady heartbeat filled the room. She broke down instantly, relief crashing over her in trembling sobs. The baby was alive. But the doctor's expression remained cautious. "There's stress from the impact," he explained gently. "We'll need to monitor you closely. There could still be complications." He paused before asking softly, "How did you fall?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Protecting her husband had been instinct for so long. But as she placed her hand over her belly, feeling the fragile life beneath it, something shifted inside her. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about protecting her child. He didn't hear about the ambulance from her. He heard it from one of the staff members, who called with a careful, trembling explanation about the fall and the hospital. For a brief second, there was silence on the line. Not shock. Not fear. Calculation. "Who else saw?" he asked coldly. The staff member hesitated. "Just security and the paramedics." He ended the call, without another word. His mind was already racing, not toward her condition, but toward headlines, rumors, investors, the fragile empire of respect he had built. A scandal involving a pregnant wife in a storm could spread fast. Very fast. When he finally arrived at the hospital, his suit was immaculate, his expression controlled. Nurses glanced at him, whispering quietly. He walked into her room without knocking. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, pale against the white sheets, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. For a fleeting moment he paused, but it wasn't concern that filled his eyes. "What were you thinking?" he demanded in a low, sharp voice. "Do you realize what this looks like?" She blinked at him, confused. "I fell." "You slipped," he corrected quickly. "Let's not turn this into something dramatic." Her heart sank. "You pushed me," she said weakly. He scoffed. "Don't exaggerate. You lost your balance. And now there are nurses staring at me like I'm some villain." His tone grew harsher. "Are you trying to gain sympathy? Is that what this is?" The doctor, who had been reviewing her chart near the doorway, glanced up at the tension filling the room. His expression shifted, observant and disapproving. She stared at her husband, waiting, hoping, for even a flicker of regret. There was none. No apology. No fear for the baby. Only irritation. In that moment, something inside her quietly hardened. The last fragile thread of denial snapped. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "You endangered your own child." The hospital room was quiet long after visiting hours ended. Machines hummed softly in the darkness, and the city lights flickered faintly through the window. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting over her stomach as if reassuring herself the steady heartbeat she had heard earlier was still there. Sleep refused to come. In the silence, memory surfaced, moments she had once dismissed. The time he criticized her dress before a gala and made her change 3 times. The way he reviewed her bank statements, questioning every purchase, as if she were irresponsible. The dinners where he spoke over her, correcting her in front of guests with a tight smile. The isolation that followed when friends stopped calling because invitations were quietly declined on her behalf. None of it had seemed violent, but it had been control. Slowly tightening, slowly shrinking her. Tonight had not been sudden. It had been escalation. She turned slightly, wincing at the soreness in her back. What would happen after the baby was born? If he could push her while she was pregnant, what would stop him later? The thought chilled her more than the storm had. A nurse entered quietly to check her vitals. She must have noticed the tears on her pillow because her voice softened. "You deserve safety," she said gently, adjusting the monitor. "Both of you do." The words lingered long after the nurse left. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone and called her sister. The moment she heard her voice, the strength she had been holding together cracked. She told her everything, the argument, the fall, the hospital. There was no judgment on the other end, only fierce support. The next morning, she took photos of the bruises forming along her arm and back. She requested copies of her medical reports. By afternoon, her sister had arranged a meeting with a lawyer. The consultation was calm but direct. The lawyer explained the legal grounds clearly: endangerment of a pregnant woman, emotional abuse, negligence resulting in physical harm. "You have options," he assured her. She hesitated. Public scandal would follow. Headlines. Scrutiny. Judgment. Sensing her fear, the lawyer leaned forward slightly. "Money doesn't protect someone from consequences." She looked down at the pen in her hand. For months, she had been afraid of losing comfort. Now she feared losing safety more. With a steady breath, she signed the papers. The courthouse steps were crowded long before the doors opened. Cameras flashed relentlessly, reporters speaking urgently into microphones as news vans lined the street. Headlines had spread like wildfire. Wealthy businessman accused of endangering pregnant wife. For a man who had spent years crafting a flawless public image, this was the kind of attention he could not control. He arrived first, stepping out of a sleek black car, his expression stern and carefully composed. His legal team surrounded him immediately, sharp suits, confident strides, whispers of strategy exchanged as they walked. They projected certainty, as if the case were a minor inconvenience rather than a moral reckoning. When she arrived, the noise shifted. She walked slowly up the steps, one hand resting gently on her visible baby bump. She wore no dramatic makeup, no expensive designer showpieces, just a simple, elegant dress. Her face was calm, but there was quiet strength in her posture. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at him. Inside the courtroom, tension hung thick in the air. Spectators filled the benches. Every cough, every shuffle of paper felt amplified. He avoided her gaze as they sat on opposite sides of the room, a symbolic distance reflecting the emotional gulf between them. The prosecution began methodically. Hospital reports were submitted first, detailing bruising, abdominal trauma, and the risk posed to the pregnancy. The doctor testified about the stress impact and the necessity of emergency monitoring. Words like high risk, potential miscarriage, and physical force echoed uncomfortably. Then came the security footage. Before it played, one of the guards took the stand. His voice trembled slightly as he described the argument spilling into the entrance hall, the forceful grip, the shove. The defense tried to undermine him, suggesting exaggeration or misunderstanding. He held firm. When it was his turn, the husband's attorney argued confidently that it had all been an unfortunate accident. A slippery surface during severe weather, he insisted. No intent, no malicious act. But intent was not the only issue. The prosecutor stood and spoke clearly, emphasizing the vulnerability of a pregnant woman and the reckless disregard for an unborn child's safety. This is not about a marital disagreement, she said firmly. This is about endangerment. Then she was called to testify. She rose slowly, walking to the stand with measured steps. The courtroom grew utterly silent. Her voice was steady at first as she described the argument, but when she recounted the moment her foot slipped and her hands instinctively shielded her stomach, emotion tightened her words. I wasn't thinking about myself, she said softly. I was thinking about my baby. Several people lowered their eyes. The judge watched her closely, expression grave. Across the room, her husband shifted in his seat for the first time, discomfort flickering across his face. Then the footage played in full. On the large courtroom screen, every detail was undeniable. The raised arm, the open doors, the shove, the fall. No distortion. No missing angles. The storm raged in the background as she crumpled onto the steps. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. In that moment, his carefully constructed reputation began collapsing in real time. The courtroom felt suffocating as everyone rose for the judge's return. The silence carried weight, thick with anticipation and consequence. He stood rigid beside his attorneys, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward as though determination alone could bend the outcome. The judge's voice was calm but unwavering as the decision was read. The court found him liable for endangerment and for causing emotional distress to his pregnant wife. The evidence, particularly the security footage and medical testimony, demonstrated reckless disregard for her safety and the safety of the unborn child. The words echoed through the room with finality. A significant financial settlement was awarded to ensure medical care, stability, and protection for both mother and baby. A protective order was granted immediately, legally barring him from contact outside controlled legal proceedings. The judge further stated that the matter could be referred for potential criminal review, given the severity of the risk involved. The sound of cameras clicking outside the courtroom doors was already growing louder. Within hours, the media storm intensified. Business headlines shifted from praise to scrutiny. Investors began distancing themselves. Partnerships quietly dissolved. Board members released carefully worded statements. The empire he had built on reputation now trembled under public judgment. He remained standing as the courtroom slowly emptied, his legal team speaking in hushed tones beside him. For the first time, he looked smaller, stripped not of wealth, but of control. Power no longer shielded him. Across the room, she exhaled deeply, a breath she felt she had been holding for months. She did not feel triumph. She felt relief. Months passed, and the storm that had once shaken her life felt like a distant memory. She cradled her healthy newborn in her arms, the soft weight of life against her chest filling her with awe and quiet gratitude. Their new home was modest compared to the towering mansion they had left behind, but it radiated warmth, safety, and calm. No marble floors gleamed under artificial lights. Instead, sunlight streamed through simple curtains, painting soft patterns on wooden floors. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and home-cooked meals, a gentle reminder that peace could exist in small, intentional spaces. She held her baby close, rocking gently, and whispered a promise, her voice tender but resolute. "No one will ever make us feel unsafe again." Outside, the morning sun broke fully through lingering clouds, scattering golden light across their little haven. The storm was over, replaced by the warmth of a new beginning.